Hello there, my friends. Chris Marcus here with you for Arcadia Economics, and we are digging back into silver, all the stunning things that have been happening, especially as we sit here today in June of 2019. Silver still below the cost of production. So real pleasure to have Harvey Organ joining me today, who's been researching the precious metals for almost 20 years, digs into a lot of the shenanigans on the COMEX. So, Harvey, great to have you on here today. How is everything going, my friend?
It's doing wonderful, and thanks for having me, Chris.
Well, it's a pleasure. And how about just to get started, maybe you can give an overview of what you're seeing and where things are at, and we can take it from there.
Sure. Well, as you know, silver has been the market which has been totally annihilated by the banks. And it is the number one product which has been massively short by our major banks, including our number one bank, Deutsche Bank. And they are massively short, and they're in trouble now because of their huge shortage. But of course, the ringleader over on this side of the pond is JP Morgan. Now, what's been lately they've been using is what we call these exchange for physicals. And It used to be just you could only use them in emergency. And now we're seeing probably 4 times the annual production of the world it has been exchanged for physical. And these are moved over to London, but they're really not settled yet. Okay, it's just a paper transaction. And it's been going a little more longer in the gold. Gold has been 3.5, 4 years now for these exchange for physicals in great quantity, and silver we're now seeing 3 years. So it started 1 year later, and now it's becoming at huge quantities. I have written to the OCC telling them that they have a problem because of the risk to the banks. And of course, they have not answered me to that. And not only that, Representative Mooney took my letter and, of course, wrote it again to the CFTC for answering. And, of course, they don't want to answer, and the OCC as well. And the reason how they get around this, they use what is called serial forwards in London. And it goes every 13 days. So it's every 13 days it turns over. And if it's 14 days, you have to report it to the OCC or the risk management to the government and saying, hey, this is a risk to the banks. But if it's 13 days or less, you don't have to. So that's why these doorknobs are continually using these 13-day serial forwards. And that's how they're avoiding the risk, which will also explain why they don't want to answer us at all when we write a letter, because they know they're in a mess. Like they've not once. And I've talked to the CFTC, and I told them about these exchange for physicals, and I said, it's about time you tell the world what's going on. And of course, they don't want to. And the reason is because they know it's fraudulent. For sure, it's a fraudulent situation. Okay, so that's what's ongoing now, and it's a new phenomenon. Of course, before they would, exchange for physicals was started in actually 1974. But it was used very, very infrequently, 1 or 2 every 5 years, So it just started now, the last 3 years, because there is no physical metal at all, either at the COMEX. And certainly, the gold is gone. There is no gold. And all the gold that was there has been hypothecated, and all you have is little stickies left that this guy owes that guy. But this is paper. Silver is probably being accumulated for JP Morgan. There's a lot of physical silver in JP Morgan's vault, but I am pretty sure that silver is meant for mainland sovereign China. And what we'll have to see on that. See what's happened in 2002 when the United States ran out of their silver in the Manhattan Project. They needed silver to continue the fraud of selling short and stuff. So they called on China, which had about 1 billion ounces of silver, and said, listen, can we have your silver? Of course, China said, great. And that's how China became a favored nation. China was thrilled because they not only they got their when the United States got the silver, they continued the whacking of gold and silver. China was happy. Why? Because they can get gold cheaply, and they did.
Right.
And I'm in the same camp as Angus MacLeod. We think China's got between 20 and 25,000 tons of gold, and that's why there's no gold over at the COMEX.
I've been hearing a lot of folks who say that those numbers are far bigger than the few thousand tons they report. So it is interesting to wonder how much they do have.
Well, actually, I can prove that they they can undervalue their gold. China announced that they added official reserves of 16 tons last few days, which is interesting, is because China produces about 400 tons of gold per year, which is about 33 tons a year. So and not 1 ounce ever leaves. So in other words, they even kept 14 tons and didn't record it. The gold is kept in vaults at the banks, and they slowly, whenever they feel like it, record it as official reserves.
Right.
And I'm confident when I tell you that that China has at least 20,000 tons. They've been doing this since 1984, where nobody's ever noticed what was going on. And China's always been a country that they don't like paper much. They will make sure they have physical. So I think China's been accumulating it all the way since 84, 85. And no, it was certainly not on the radar. And that's how they were able to accumulate this. And they accommodated the West. Now all of a sudden, Trump is going on his tirade against them for stealing, and they probably are stealing. The Huawei is stealing technology, but it doesn't. But the real problem, of course, is the silver that they want back, and the United States is may not want to give it back to them. And that's why the 280 million ounces, or close to that, I think, is stored by J.P. Morgan. And they haven't done anything. They just kept it there. And there's been a lot of discussions with myself and the CFTC on the amount of silver that's stored in J.P. Morgan vault, which is owned by China, by the way. Mainland China owns that vault that is there. So it's quite a story. Okay, so that's basically the background. If you want to ask me some questions on the derivative side, I can certainly help you on that. And what's going on in my conversations with the CFTC, I could certainly give a lot more insight for your viewers.
Yeah, well, those are both topics certainly I'd like to dig into. Perhaps just to get started, well, not to get started, but you mentioned with the EFPs, I have been hearing about those. You've been writing about them for, I guess it's a couple of years now. Is it correct to think of that when we see a large growing amount of EFPs out there, is that essentially there's more paper claims per each physical ounce? Is that a correct way to interpret that, or would you phrase that differently?
No, you were 100% accurate. It's a paper. It's a paper call. It's the owner. It's a demand. Okay, when we see owners take an exchange for physical, he has that right for physical, whether it's on this side of the pond or over in London. You see, it's a demand, and that's why when I write both sides. Right. It's not, you just don't do the demand coming out of the COMEX, because you have contracts as well. These banks and owners have these exchange for physicals, and they may just take a right or an obligation to a bank, and they have that right to exchange that at any time for physical. The problem, of course, the banks are going to have is you have too many of these go ask for metal, then of course the banks are going to be in default, and that's where it's heading. And that's why you're seeing. By the way, it's very important that silver in London is backward. From the spot versus the future month, 10, 12 cents, whatever it is. It's severe. And that's because there's no physical supply there. So the banks are now got major problems. And the derivatives, I mean, I would probably guess we're dealing with, in gold, probably 500 ounces per one. And I think it's even worse in silver. I think we're close to 700 maybe ounces, obligations per 1 ounce out there. That's how stupid this game is.
It's interesting. I've been asking a lot of folks for each ounce of metal, how many claims do you think there actually are on it? And, again, folks like David Morgan, Bill Murphy, Keith Newmeyer, others, all have pretty much guessed 500 to 1 or above. Um, and with those EFPs, something as I was doing a little research, listening to some of your past interviews last night, and let me know if I'm quoting this correctly, but I believe you said if someone on the COMEX has a long contract and it can't be delivered, the CFTC allows them, or I don't know if you said could force them to accept an EFP, but essentially, are there people who have been long a contract and have not been given a choice, and instead of the metal, they're saying, here's your EFP, which, if that's the case, would sound like already a default of sorts. What exactly is going on there? Can they force someone to take that rather than the physical metal?
Yes, and they do. To them, they've settled, and for them, a long is asking for metal, and they're saying we're settling at this, and even though it's not technically physical yet, they're saying it has the right for physical, therefore it is. And it became a screaming match between myself and the CFTC, and I said it's fraudulent. You got to have physical metal. You cannot use any paper to settle, and of course that became a violent scene. And I just don't want to go more and more into this, but you hit it right on the answer is yes, they force it. Okay, so the answer is yes.
Which is incredible.
Yeah, go
ahead. And I mean, because I think a lot of us, we've always expected that we would eventually reach that point where there's some sort of default, but it sounds like in some ways already happening. Now, you've mentioned the CFTC a couple times. And I was actually fortunate to do an interview with Bart Chilton shortly before he passed away, which certainly was unfortunate to hear. Yeah. Was really grateful to get a chance to talk with him because some of the things that he said really, from a regulatory side, confirmed a lot of what folks like you and Ted Butler and others have been saying about what was going on with the CFTC and JP Morgan in the silver market. And in particular, I'd love to get your thought on this because as I was going through the transcript the other day, I was really just stunned seeing it in a different light. He confirmed that JP Morgan took over the short from Bear Stearns. And when I asked
100%
him,
correct.
Did you think that had anything to do with the price dropping from $21 to $9, which again, this was 2008, right after Bear Stearns was failing, Lehman failed.
Yeah.
I'd add at the same time period, the VIX, the volatility index, was spiking.
Sure.
So another indicator that should have been reacting similar to silver. And also Bart confirmed that after JP Morgan took over the position, that it was already over the limits. The CFTC said you have to make it smaller. They made it bigger.
Correct.
So you have this short position growing while the price is plummeting. So I'll let you take it from there.
And the most important thing is that they are accumulating physical metal. Mm-hmm. And that has been confirmed by the CFTC to me now. The CFTC has committed to me that JP Morgan is allowed to pick up massive amounts of silver while at the same time being short. I said that's illegal. They said that to them it's legal, and I said, and look, I'm not a lawyer in this, but you know it stands to reason you can. And I've had some lawyers check on this. It's phony what they said. You can't be a massive short, then use the lower price to accumulate metal from somebody and store it. Of course, then the problem is if they're accumulating for sovereign United States, who are in turn accumulating it for sovereign China, that's a different matter because then you have a sovereign nation, and of course they can do anything, and it's no criminality. But I then told the CFTC, and the last thing they told me was that, you know, who says that JP Morgan holds that metal for themselves? they could hold it for somebody, another sovereign. And I said, well,
Mm-hmm.
I says, you're now in my alley. That's what I believe. I believe that that JP Morgan, that the silver is being that held here is really for mainland China. And it's held first for the U.S. by the U.S. government, and the U.S. government has to decide when to give it over, and the U.S. government doesn't want to give it yet, of course, because the United States and China are having a massive trade dispute. So, and then of course they're going to use their rare earths to attack, and the United States will then attack with the silver. It's a lot of things that are going on behind the scenes. But that's certainly one of them. And the other big scenario going on is, of course, the mess that's over in Deutsche Bank. And when you see Deutsche Bank at €6 or something like that, they're in deep trouble, and they are short. They are massively short precious metals, and that's why they went to the judge. They went unilaterally to the judge and said, "Listen, don't give me a huge fine, but I'll tell you, we've been involved massively and criminally in manipulating silver and gold," and they did. And you should see some of the chat room discussions. And I had that with the CFTC, and he said, "How do you know this garbage?" And now you got JP Morgan guy, Edmonds, who's giving who's involved in giving testimony, and of course they've delayed his sentencing for twice already. So obviously there's some big stuff, and of course if Edmund starts nailing Blythe Masters and it goes all the way to the top, then that JP Morgan's got major problems. So that's where the situation is now. Okay, I mean, there's no doubt there's criminality to the highest degree here, and of course the reason for the softness in the price is the massive amounts of paper. And you can use infinite amount of paper. You can see CFTC is not doing anything about it. So when you have infinite amount of paper supplying the price, I mean, they can knock the price down to zero if they wanted to. Okay, and the object of the exercise is those guys that that have these paper, turn them into real metal. And when everybody starts turning into metal, the game's over. I mean, that's there's just not enough silver around, and that's when the game ends. Okay, and it won't end any other way. None. It'll have to end when the physical supply has disappeared, and it goes into vaults. And like Andrew Maguire's Kinesis certainly is doing a wonderful job of moving precious metals over to his vaults, and that's causing major problems in Europe. Major problems for them, because physical is now being turned into vaults over there. Right. Into his, and I can assure you that the banks are having problems. Okay, I'm seeing it in gold, where guys been asking for their gold back, and of course the banks are refusing. Says you can't get it. So guys who are owners even allocated gold and can't get their metal, and the reason is because it's already been hypothecated out already. That's how bad it is in Europe. So you're seeing all that happening.
Yeah, it's incredible. And I think a lot of folks, obviously gold and silver investors, not been the easiest last 8 years, because we hear about the deficits. We hear that it's a scramble to get metal. Is there any way to put in context, or any way to measure how much metal is left, and how close perhaps we might be to getting to the point where someone comes in for an order, wants delivery, and it can't be filled, which I guess you mentioned is already to some degree occurring with the EFPs. But is there any way to put that into context for folks of how close we might be?
Okay, all right, I can do it in both metals. How's this? Okay. Mm-hmm. In gold, I record, and I get it right around 3 o'clock. So you'll be seeing me tonight. At 3 minutes after 3 in gold, actually gold and silver, we get the COMEX inventory levels. And you'll see when I write about gold, interestingly, no gold ever comes in. In fact, I have very, very little gold. The only gold that technically comes in is what we call kilobars, but they don't deliver kilobars. It's just an entry that was used. It's really a paper entry to show who owes what. So I don't think so. If you look and you'll see inventory levels at gold, you'll see it's non-existent. So COMEX has been out of gold for a long time, but there is silver coming in. But I have a strange feeling that silver is eventually gets over to J.P. Morgan, who has probably 50% of the silver, and they put it over into their vault on 44 Liberty Street. The problem we have, of course, is what goes on in London, and London is a very opaque market. So even though it's somewhat more transparent here in New York, once I get to London, we have no idea what goes on. So the only thing I can tell that there's scarcity is by backwardation. When I see backwardation, then I know they're having trouble, and the length of time that it takes them to deliver silver to our forwards. But as far as that, I really don't know exactly. But the physical market is certainly tight in both gold and silver, and there's no question about it. And you can see by the use of these exchange for physicals over this side of the line, they continue to use huge quantities, and it gets over there. It's when these guys that have the ownership of these exchange for physicals turn them into metal, that's when the game ends. And it's an easy way to do it. It's an easy way for the banks because it's certainly an obligation. They can't stop it. Just say, go take my metal, and that'll put enough pressure on the banks that they'll fail.
Yeah,
okay,
sure seems like it's headed that way. It's funny you mentioned Deutsche Bank, and I believe it was Deutsche Bank and Citigroup that somehow recently ended up with Venezuela's gold, which I can only pray that one day we get the real story of what's happening behind the scenes of that one. Do you have any thoughts on that? How we had this default, and then once again, the American banks, or I guess European banks for Deutsche Bank, but ending up with Venezuela's gold.
Yeah, well, I will categorically tell you that gold has been leased out already. So as soon as they got it, they leased it out. They needed so when they took possession of paper gold. So they had nothing more to sell. It was already gone to the marketplace already years ago. I mean, Maduro is a real doorknob. I mean, they had a very wealthy country. Venezuela was one of the wealthiest in 1900. Geez, in South America, probably the wealthiest. And all of a sudden, they had gold. They took in huge amounts of gold. They have the largest reserves of oil in the world, and yet they're bankrupt. The gold that was Citibank's and Deutsche Bank has been leased and gone. It certainly will not enter into the marketplace now and on new sales. Okay, it's gone. It'll never come back. So I mean, as far as every one of you guys, it's not a future problem for us to consider that they sell all this gold, as others are reporting. Believe me, it's been sold 1,000 times over already.
Yeah.
Okay. They use the same trick of hypothecation, and that's why you get all these 500 to 800 ones. They keep using the same serial numbers, and then they keep selling against this. There's just so much paper against it per 1 ounce. It's when this 1 ounce is called in, that's when the crisis comes. Anyway, don't consider yourself any worrisome about the Venezuela gold. Okay.
Yeah, it's truly incredible the things that are happening at this point, and you wonder how much longer it goes. I know a lot of folks often talk about how the reason things haven't accelerated in the price is that you don't really have much American retail demand, which, I can understand that. Although at the same time, we keep hearing that India is buying a ton of silver. Is it possible that some other sovereigns start buying silver to the degree that it's enough to compensate for a lack of demand in the U.S. retail and force this issue?
Sure. Okay. First of all, you're wrong when the demand for silver this year is over 1 billion ounces, and the supply coming in from all the mining is about 700 million. So we have a deficit of 300 million ounces. Okay, and that's where it is now. So the demand is still very strong. Will a sovereign take in silver? I don't think so. Gold certainly, because that's money. Okay, silver is close to money. India has certainly, as I mentioned earlier, India has taken a huge amount these last 2 months. They've certainly brought in a lot of silver. China, who produces about 117 million ounces of silver a year, is bringing in silver. And of course, they manufacture the photocells, for energy. They certainly are using that. And if they have to import silver, it means the 117 million that they produce is not enough. So they're bringing silver from outside. But the demand for silver is very, very strong. It's not weak at all. The retail, if you're saying retail for coins and stuff like that, that's small. Okay, that's small. And I just take a look at the total demand for silver, and we're over a billion ounces. And of course, I know how much the mine's coming. There's only about 25% of the world's supply comes from primary mines, Pan American silver. The rest of them comes as an adjunct to gold production or copper production,
right?
And that's 75% of supplies. So there's not too much, but there's still. I think this is the first year that actually silver production came down a bit. It went from, I think, net of 700. I don't count scrap, so I take scrap out. I think 700. It was 706, and now it's 696 or something like that. It's close to that. I mean, so they're not getting the supplies coming in from the mines as they used to. But demand is still very strong. Demand around the world is still very, very strong. Even though it's like
also the supply has been going down, and certainly given that we're seeing mines get shut down, I mean, you have the price of silver below or below what it costs to dig it out of the ground. So there's kind of that, circular effect where the longer the price is so low. Then on top of it, you have, I guess it depends on which day, whether we have a new trade war with Mexico or whether that's resolved. But here, one of the biggest, or I believe Mexico is the biggest producer of silver.
It is.
And doesn't seem like that relationship is headed in the right direction at the moment.
It doesn't make much sense for Trump to go and make them angry. Fresnillo is, of course, the largest silver producer over there, and of course they use CNT, and they bring in the silver. It's when that silver that's brought in by Mexico gets diverted over to Europe to supply them. I think that's when the COMEX is going to have a major catastrophe. And that's what I'm looking for. In other words, the silver doesn't get in from Mexico; goes directly. It circumvents the United States. It goes directly to Rotterdam or wherever the ports are for the silver production. Where they take in the silver, and then go to their proper destinations. And I think that's what's going on. I really do. I think Mexico is certainly not happy with Trump and what's been happening. And of course, China's certainly not happy at their front. And of course, you're seeing they're using rare earths, and of course, they can use gold and silver at any time they want. And that's what everyone should watch for. I mean, there's too much paper. These banks have been, controlling the market price with paper, where it used to be physical metal. I don't know if you knew that before in the 1970s, 74, 75, it took 2 days, and then everything was settled. So let's say I stand for delivery on the first 2 days, it's gone. That's it. The next 28 days, nothing happens because it's all delivered. And all of a sudden you're seeing it takes the whole month, and then you're seeing queue jumping, and you're seeing all these crazy things going on at the con. Never before happened. So these are all new phenomena, and it tells you that it's in crisis. Okay, and then the crisis is that the physical metals are disappearing. Anybody that stores their metal at the COMEX has got to be out of their cotton pick a mine. Okay, because you store your metal there, it's gone.
May as well just put it in the middle of the street and hope for the best, dude. Figure.
That's for sure. It's all gone. It's hypothecated. It's I don't know if you know, all COMEX gold and silver stored is unallocated. If you have any unallocated gold, no matter where it is, that gold and silver is gone. It's hypothecated and leased out. Okay, it's not stored, and that's how these criminals are doing this game. So the game, as I told you, just wait until the good guys come and say, "I've had enough. I'm taking all my physical," and that's it. And says to the banks, "We're not playing this game anymore." And there'll be
It
Yeah.
certainly seems like it's headed there because, again, I've been baffled ever since Trump started his trade war with China, where, antagonizing your largest creditor seems like, not the best idea in my opinion. And to add to that, I believe in that, I'm sure you remember that debate with Bill Murphy and Jeff Christian 7 or 8 years ago. And one of the things as I was reviewing that was interesting. Bill mentioned there was a WikiLeaks cable that showed that China was well aware that the U.S. was suppressing the gold and silver prices. So, really when you
Oh,
think
they
about
should
the range of responses that, especially a U.S. government that at this point exists solely because of the ability to print money, this whole gold and silver situation, doesn't it sound like another big Achilles heel that if you push someone too far, I mean, there's how they can really strike back.
Wouldn't you? That's exactly what they're doing.
Yeah.
It's China. China knows what they're doing. China, remember, you got to think, China has lent the silver. That starts it off. And then they start giving them rare earths, which they need in 70% of the world's supply is rare earths, and they need this in all these little things that they need. All of a sudden, you got the two major items, of course, China's, and then China's quite now scratching their head and says, "Wait a minute, you're going attacking me?" So
they're calling him a currency manipulator.
Right.
Trump is
Look who's
farming
the manipulator.
rates.
Look who's the manipulator. I mean, I know when raids are called. I know you got to read when they do all these special raids, and you notice the raids are now becoming less frequently. They need to do it in illiquid markets. So when Europe was off on Monday, that's why gold was hit. They don't want to do it in liquid times where they're afraid they're going to stand for delivery. So as soon as let's say I buy a contract, they're afraid I'm going to turn around and say, okay, I'll take delivery. That's why they're afraid. You're seeing that's done more. They're now scared. And you'll notice that if any gold or silver is sold off, it's done after 12 o'clock. Why 12 o'clock? Because London is put to bed already. So they don't have to worry for the next 2 or 3 hours. But then the next day they worry about it. But their time period is so short, they say, okay, I'll worry about that tomorrow morning. That's how these crooked guys are thinking. But there's no question what I'm telling you is that you're looking at Deutsche Bank, you're looking at all these guys, and I'm telling you the physical is going to finally overtake the paper market, where it should be.
Yeah, well, it's amazing. It seems like we're rapidly headed towards that. I remember when I was leaving Wall Street in 2012, if you had told me this would still be going on 7 years later, I don't know if I could have believed that. But when you look at all the things that are going on, certainly I think it's unfortunate for Americans, which I'm living here in Denver, when you see your government basically gambling away the nation's resources, and I might add gambling extremely poorly. I'm not trying to take sides, but just as someone sitting there watching it, I mean, China's eating the American government's lunch. And you wonder how much much longer it goes on for, but certainly fascinating times. And wrapping up, Harvey, perhaps you can just let folks know how they can find you online and stay in touch with all the great things you're doing. And because certainly we have interesting times unfolding, and it'd be wild to see how it goes.
Yeah, well, I write every day, Monday through Friday. You can dial in at www.harveyorgan.wordpress.com. So you can find me in every day, and I spend most of my time doing the COMEX, okay? And then I write other stories which affect gold and silver, but it's mainly the fraud, because I felt that the COMEX was the center part of the fraud. So I every day I do the inventory movements, I do the exchange for physicals, I total the exchange for physicals. So you can see for yourself how much this thing is a fraud and where it's heading. So it's free, so anybody can dial in, and you can view my stuff and what goes on every day.
Well, Harvey, I sure appreciate that. Appreciate you joining me for the interview today and also for the things that you leave online because for most of us, the COMEX and LBMA, certainly a black box. So great to get some insight into what's going on there. Will be fascinating to see how it all unfolds, and we will check back in with you again soon. But thank you again for joining me.
Anytime.
I appreciate it.
And thank you for having me.